Hello, hello. I'm Nicole Glenn. I am the co-host of the LLC podcast, and it's an honor to introduce listeners to inspiring women who are making a real difference in logistics and supply chain. With the LLC podcast, you'll hear inspirational stories, both professional and personal challenges our guests overcame, how their backgrounds help shape who they are today, and how they empower others, give back to their communities, and often the world. So today I'm very excited to have Cassie Quien joining us today on the episode. So you and I got to meet, what was it, at Food Shippers this
Food
year?
Shippers, yeah, I had to think which one it was, but it was Food Shippers earlier.
Yeah, so I'm just so excited that we finally got to connect and have you on here because you've been doing some great things in the industry, and I just love bringing women into the spotlight that can really show and lift and really tell the truth behind what it is that you've had to do and overcome to be in the spot that you are today. So you're with a company called FreightVana, and I would love to hear, give us some insight on you personally, but then what are you doing these days for work?
Yeah, perfect. Super excited to be here, Nicole. Thank you for having me on the podcast. In terms of FreightVana, I have been there for just a year now, just hit my 1 year mark, and the company is just hit our 2 year anniversary last week. So started in 2021 with a wonderful team that started on their day one with about 20 people, came from a large national trucking company. And they started FreightVana, and it's been an incredible journey to be on, just with the differentiated model that we are bringing to the market with our power-only abilities and the trailers that we have spanning coast to coast that are owned and branded by FreightVana. I'm part of the sales team here. It's my first traditional sales role. I think we'll probably get into my background a little bit as we talk here. But it has been a crazy year of just learning so much, but getting to be surrounded by this incredible team of really just brilliant people that are all working towards one goal to change the industry a little bit.
Yeah.
That's what we're on.
It seems like a fun crew that you have there too, and that makes a huge difference.
It is. There is not one bad apple in the bunch, and they're just like everybody. A lot of personalities are online, so I think people who follow FreightVana or some of the voices on LinkedIn can get kind of a taste and feel for what we're about and what we're doing. But all of that is so authentic and genuine, and I think that's a piece that I love so much about this company, is just the way that we're able to show up for one another, but then also our external partners too.
Yeah, no, that's completely amazing. Yeah, I love watching, and I actually got to see my first trailer on the road.
Where were you?
Oh my gosh, this was probably 2 months ago. I've been doing a lot of traveling, so I can't even tell you where it's been.
Okay.
But I was driving, and I was like, oh my gosh, I wish I could take a picture. I couldn't, but it was really cool to see it actually out there, and not just on LinkedIn.
In the wild.
Yeah.
The excitement that we all share for seeing the trailers is, like, I've worked at a couple other asset-based companies before joining FreightVana, and liked seeing the trailers on the road. It was cool, but seeing a FreightVana trailer is just something different for us, because it's only been 2 years, and the scope that we have, the ground that we're covering, and what is behind that logo just means so much to all of us. It's fun to see it.
That is cool. So I always I didn't throw this out as a question to you, but you started at a new company when freight kind of transitioned too, right?
Yeah.
So it was like a couple of years ago, or a year or two, a year and a half ago, it was kind of this feast type time. And so making a transition into a new company, that is when the economy and the trucking environment has changed a little bit. What has that been like for you?
Yeah, it's been a grind for sure. And especially to be part of a role that's responsible for growing with the brands that we're bringing on, the shippers we're working with. It's definitely learning a lot through this and just what it takes. I think we take for granted when we're at a company that's been in business for 10, 20, 30, 90 years, that a lot of the relationships they have are the incumbency. It goes back so far that, yes, you're impacted, but it's a little bit different when you've got a long relationship to rely on, just in terms of the business aspect of bringing on more freight.
Right.
So yes, it has been an interesting year, but I think with the growth we're still having and the movement behind it, it's I wouldn't want to be anywhere else, despite the market that it is and the fact that we're a new company trying to grow our market share.
Yeah. And you said my favorite word, and I've been talking to a lot of people about it, because the company that I own, we've actually been hitting record months. And we're smaller. We're not, we're not a team of 500 people. But at the same time, it's that word that you said, that grind. I mean, that is really
Yeah.
what makes all the difference, because a lot of people will kind of sit back right
They'll
now.
make excuses. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's the dead opposite. This is when you actually have to work the hardest you've ever worked in your life to bring that value and keep showcasing that. So I was happy when you just threw that word out.
Yeah.
So very, very cool.
That's a lot of just what the day is in and out, is that grind, that grit, the passion. If you care right now and you can like see the silver lining or the wins, or you make up some of the ground in this space, then when it flips, like, we are set.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And then it's like, okay, let's go operations.
Yeah.
Align.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask a question about you too, because when you've stepped into this industry, I'm sure you've learned a lot, right? So if you could teach young women that are coming into this industry, I know we're in a challenging time right now, but if you could teach these women something, what would be that most important thing that you would say?
It's a good question. I would say women that are looking to come into this industry, or honestly, like maybe someone who's fresh out of school, don't bucket your opportunity based on what you think the industry is or what it has available for you. I got into this industry by taking a very traditional marketing role as a marketing coordinator, trying to use my college degree, as I'm supposed to. And then I found out that like there's so much more to this industry than me trying to do marketing for, I don't even know how the trucks operate or what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So like get into the operation and be willing to move around, learn different segments. I never saw myself before I entered. Well, I never saw myself in trucking. I think a lot of us share that.
Oh yeah.
Fixed trucking. I think a lot of us share that same sentiment. I had worked at Nordstrom in college just for fun because it was like a dream of mine to sell shoes. And I thought I would kind of follow that career path of something in fashion, being a buyer. And I wound up in trucking. And it's like, you don't know where you're going to land, but you have to be open to the experience. So I went from like selling shoes at Nordstrom and seeing this different path to 6 months later, I'm dispatching grown men on the road. Like, not what I thought I would do, but it's worked out quite wonderful.
Yeah.
So I think like being open.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it teaches you like just the fundamentals of business in general, how to work with people and teams, and those words that you threw out, grit. This is something that I left logistics for. Well, I was supposed to leave logistics and I ended up going right back into it. But and when the company had started where I went, it was not a logistics role. And I was like, this is not fast paced. Like I'm bored. This is so boring. Like, give me something to do that keeps it going. So yeah, I mean, I agree with you. To kind of just keep putting yourself out there. That's awesome. So in your time in logistics, how have you found a mentor? Do you have one today? And what does that relationship look like? And I know I'm asking like 7 questions at once, but how did you get to that spot? Because I think a lot of our listeners really struggle around this area of mentorship, and what is that traditional relationship like and how to approach it? So what's worked best for you?
Yeah, I would say thinking of a mentor professionally, like in the logistics space, the one that comes to mind for me is an individual. Her name was Lori Murphy, and I worked with her very early on when I started my career. I spent about 7 years at this asset-based carrier in Minneapolis, and I met her when I was in that marketing coordinator role, really just supporting the sales team. She was the VP of sales. We separated when I went into the operation. I wasn't as close to her. But then slowly, as I worked through different leadership roles in the operation up through the customer service and ops side, we started to reconnect again. And she became a mentor very naturally for me. I think that we connected well when I supported her team, and I just looked up to her immensely as, you are someone that I want to be someday. Like, I want to be in sales someday, to follow what you do, because I just found her so impressive in a room. Mm-hmm. And so that mentorship for us, at least what it blossomed into, I ended up reporting to her a few years later. It was just very natural. I could turn to her with any questions I had. She had been in the industry for many, many, many years, so nothing was a surprise to her, where I was learning everything firsthand. And so she's still a mentor today. We're close friends still. despite, not working together in that light anymore. But I went through a couple of years of some career change, hopping around a little bit. And I would call her for each one and be like, what should I do? What am I doing? Am I an idiot? Like, help. Um, and so it was very, very natural. And she's
Yeah.
just been, I think she's really shaped what I've been able to do in my career in logistics.
Yeah, and I think the concept of it is with that natural side is it's important, right? So I think a lot of people have this concept that you have to go, "Hi, Cassie, can you be my mentor?"
Yeah.
And they almost want to like, have a script towards it.
Mm-hmm.
So what would be your advice to someone that's like maybe in the spot where they need a mentor, how to
Yeah.
approach that?
I think, that's maybe something I'm also kind of going through or looking at right now is like, who's my next phase of another mentor? And so something that I'm kind of doing is just trying to, someone that I see as like could be a mentor, reaching out to them again, still organically. I don't, certainly I think people can take a formal approach and ask someone. I think most people would be flattered to be asked to be a mentor. But just trying to kind of have some conversations, communication, ask them questions about their experience. And some of that should just naturally form if there's a bond there. I think if someone, I'm sure if someone reaches out to you, Nicole, and asks your advice on a situation, if you've got 20, 30 minutes to talk through something, they can just kind of naturally form based on how they can lean on you and what you've done in your career.
Sure.
So I think like not being afraid to put yourself out there. I think that's, which can be hard sometimes. I'm not the best at it all the time.
Yeah, I think it's like something for me I go through waves on. Like I
Mhm.
get really busy and then I don't have the time to do that. But something that I've done and I really started in 2020 was having an emphasis to have networking calls. So I put a goal set, kind of like the sales side of things. Like I
Yeah.
want to talk to 10 people this month
Yeah.
that I don't know and really just start the conversations on who they are and then see where that kind of leads. And by doing that back in 2020, it like literally changed the course of where I was going, by how I'm running my business, how I think
Mhm.
of things, next steps. So, I don't know if that would help anybody either that's listening is, make it a priority to have X amount of calls and just see where it goes.
Yeah.
Because
That's
I
good
feel like
advice.
we don't if there's no like you're kind of just floating through it. So like
Yeah.
having a set expectation, even if it's like I'm going to talk to 3 people this month that
Hmm.
I normally wouldn't. And LinkedIn, thank goodness for it. It's such an
Right.
awesome
That's a
platform.
great place to start for people too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is
And some people don't respond, and that's okay. Either they're
yeah.
busy or, who knows. But I've tried to be audacious. I mean, I've gone to like CEOs that are like running these massive companies, and I'm like, hi, I'm Nicole.
I mean, the worst they can do is ignore you. The best they can do is agree to speak to you.
Sure, sure. So, I mean, I love that you have one of those people that have really helped and lift,
Yeah.
and she's probably so proud of you too, watching all the things that you're doing. It's just
Yeah.
pretty cool.
Yeah. I love her.
Yeah. So, going into the leadership side of things, like you're in a company that seems to be very focused on diversity and lifting women. Not everyone is as fortunate, right?
Yeah.
So what do you think that women can do to develop like a coalition, almost like what we're doing right now,
Hmm.
of like-minded employees in a company?
I love this question because I think we've got something really cool we've started at FreightVana, and it's in the early stages, but it's something that literally any organization, no matter how big or small, can stand up. So we've started our own internal WIT program. Consider it Women in Transportation or Women in Tech because we've got quite a bit of both. And we as a group are just meeting once a month for about an hour, hour and a half. And it's all cross departments of just women in the company who a lot of us don't interact together very often, but it's to try and bridge this gap or create an area or a place for women to leaders to mentor leaders, younger team members in the company to get to speak with women leaders and hear from us, and really just kind of share what's going on, thoughts, ideas. We have different topics that we'll cover. We're getting ready to have some external speakers come in and speak to our WIT team. But really, it's like it's the easiest thing to do. You just need to set a meeting and have a Teams link or some kind of video, and that's all it takes. We don't need anything fancy to stand up a group or a program, a committee of women that can just support one another internally.
For sure. For
So
sure. How many months have you guys been doing that?
we started it in January of this year.
Okay.
So we just had our 6th meeting last week.
That's awesome. And
Yeah.
are you seeing any development even from the younger individuals, like being more vocal or anything?
That's exactly what I was going to say. I think what we've seen so far, if we compare the day 1 meeting or the first month meeting to just this last week, it's the people that are speaking up and sharing their thoughts and voicing, where I think the first few, we're all trying to feel out, like, what is this? There's no guidelines of what to do, how to do it. I don't think the few of us that started it have never ran a program like this before, but I'm incredibly excited just for what we can continue to build it into in the future.
No, that's amazing. So you guys are finding speakers. That has to be fantastic to have someone come in and tell their story. How are you guys approaching that, like finding the actual speakers?
Yeah, I'd say we're early on in some of that. We had someone kind of fall into our lap that they had met organically, and this individual coaches women, like women in a corporate setting. So I think she'll be our first speaker to come in and just talk about using your voice, how to assert yourself, and largely kind of how to navigate sometimes a male-dominated industry. That's her focus. So I would say, the last how many years we've come a long way in logistics from being a male-dominated industry, but there's still like ways to go on it. And I think with this group, we're trying to just create a place where women's voices are lifted within our organization as well.
No, that's fantastic. I went to the air cargo conference this past year, and they had a breakout session for the women.
Okay.
And it was still, it was a decent group because I've been in logistics for going on 23 years now. So I remember it would be like one of 3 in a room of 500 people. So there was a good amount of women in this session, but there were so many men in the room there supporting it. That to me was even more impactful than just having all the women there, because I think that's where that true change comes, is when we start bringing everybody into that and going, okay, we have this awesome work coalition. And now we want to invite some men in to understand why we're doing this, what we're doing here, and how can you actually play a part in lifting some of these younger folks into their next steps. So that could be something really cool too for you guys. I'm gonna keep tabs on you on this, because I love the idea of what you guys have going on there. So I guess with that too, because I'm sure stepping into a space where there was mostly male dominated, it's an industry that has just kind of moved along with this shift. But with that, like, I'm sure you stepped into spaces where you had to overcome different fears in your career. So what does that look like for you?
Yeah, I think that I can think of a few different instances where you have to overcome fear. And I think there's some that I still work through today, but thinking overall, I would say I went through a transitional period, like right in the thick of COVID, where the company I had spent most of my time with was going through a merger, and they're rebranding. And I was like, okay, this is maybe my time to try something new and get out. So I kind of went through this period of time where I ended up like job hopping around unintentionally. I went and tried the shipper side. I was like, this is great, but this is not me at all. Maybe in a different light or in a different future, it would be. I moved back to the carrier side at an organization that just did not align with my core values and goals.
Yeah.
And I think through some of that, I was really stuck and confused on what I was doing. And so I was creating this fear of what am I doing? What am I doing to my resume? What am I doing to my reputation? Just hopping every 6 months, these jobs. And then I met the FreightVana team at a food shippers conference again. And it was like a natural fit. And I'm like, am I going to hop jobs again? What am I doing? It took me a while to overcome this fear of, I'm in a place where I am unhappy. but I know what to expect. It's comfortable from a space of like, I understand how this company operates. It might not be my goal or, creating happiness for me, but it's comfortable. And I had this fear of like, okay, I can hop again and now go join a startup out of Phoenix, and I live in Minnesota, and I might believe in these people to the end of the earth after just meeting them. But like, what am I doing?
Mm-hmm.
So I think I had a big fear there of like this external image that I was creating. Ultimately made the choice to go to FreightVana. And I'm very vocal about how happy I am, and I wouldn't look back and change it. But kind of just going through and learning to follow through on being somewhere that like fits my core values. And sometimes for me, it's about so much more than just a title or money. It's really got to be about serving a corporation, a growth goal, being around like-minded people that inspire me. That is so important. And I learned that over that kind of trial time of not knowing what I was doing.
Sure. I can see that too. And I've never even thought of that, of how that could put a little pressure, because people are looking at how long you've been at a company. So I'm sure your previous tenure was great, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Then you go through that spot, and I'm sure it was daunting to like keep going through company to company going,
Yeah.
is it me or is
Yeah.
it you?
Well, that's what I was kind of getting to. I'm like, what is going on? And I heard a great piece of advice during this time that I've kept with me and I've shared with people since. But when you're in a place and you're looking to change jobs, don't run from a company, run to a company. And I was running from places I was unhappy and just taking whatever, like, okay, I got to get out of here. I'm going to go here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when FreightVana then was presented an opportunity there, I'm like, okay, I'm actually running to something that I see a wonderful future. Like, okay, get over your fears, get over your self-judgment, and just go.
Sure.
Hopefully for the last time for a while, and it's worked out. But
Well, I think interviewing is a big deal too, because I think it puts like almost like a cloud to people, like they're on stage to whoever they're trying to go work for,
yeah,
to just put their best, this is who I am, like me, like
mm-hmm.
me. But it's two ways. And I think if you're going to a company that's a good company and shares the same values as you, they're going to want to hear those questions, for you to really interview them as well. Because who really wants to deal with unhappy employees or turnover or
Right.
the silent quitters or really any of that? No one. And so I think having that mindset that, yes, you're going to go work for a company, and yes, you have a job, and yes, you do want them to select you. But at the same time, you want to feel good selecting them as well.
Yes.
We spend so much time at work. I mean, you want to make sure that that radiates kind of who you are, and you have to be proud. I always say it for the sales side too. Like, if I ever had to start and go back into some form of a sales role, I'm like, I don't think anyone would hire me, because I would blast them with so many questions that they like, who is this lady and why is she asking so much about things that don't even pertain to her? I would want to know, like,
Yeah.
what is your operational teams like? How do they work together? How do they support each other? What does that look like between sales and ops? And how does leadership cultivate this environment
Yes.
of sales or operations is not more important? They're both the same. And
Yeah.
so I think I would drive people insane.
I think you're spot on, though. I mean, I feel like I learned through that experience how important it is to interview the other side and really understand where you're going to go work. Because, like you said, it is where you spend most of your time. And I think that kind of ties back to your first question about what advice you'd give someone entering this industry. And really, again, I say it just as general. But I think when we're young and your focus is on just landing this job or landing this title, you don't think to ask all of those questions.
Right.
And it's so important to interview the company. I think it's huge.
So I know this wasn't a question that was posed to you, but when you've gotten into one of these companies, and there's always that weird kind of sticky time, you don't feel comfortable. You're still learning what they're doing, what you're doing there. How have you ever approached one of those situations with leadership if you haven't been comfortable? Have you ever had an experience with that where you had to be a little vocal and express that to see if something would change?
Yeah. I've worked through that quite a bit in the past of kind of teetering on that line of being new. So you need to kind of learn the ropes and learn how the organization works, but then also wanting to speak up on what you're seeing, or, you know, where you see there's room for improvement, or things that aren't maybe operating as expected for what you were sold to come into. I think it's important just to voice those concerns. If you don't speak up, then maybe people don't understand what you're actually seeing as an outsider who's now in the company. It's important to voice them, but then also just my big thing is just to remain respectful when you're sharing your feedback. I think our industry is so small that you never want to burn a bridge through how you approach maybe criticism or feedback, or, you know, you've got people that have worked at a company for a long time. And if you come in as a bulldozer trying to make changes, you've got to kind of walk that line carefully and see, you know, where you can make change.
Sure. There's a ton of reasons, and that's a great spot with having a mentor.
Yeah.
You know, running that by, going, hey, this is what I'm seeing. And also having, you know, mentors that maybe are in higher level leadership positions that will give you that true feedback on how to approach. Because I think everybody has good intention, but that presentation is the most important part. It's kind of like even when you're talking to customers, if you're like, hey, we're the best and we're not great here, we don't, you know, it's that the way that you're wrapping up that delivery of where your value is, even in your comments. So yeah, I think that's important and overlooked with presentation. So I want to talk about fear and this concept of the imposter syndrome. We hear about this. Like, I know I've been on many, many shows where people are like, what about that? The imposter syndrome spot, right? So the high price of insecurity is really the starting point of this question. And have you passed on opportunities because you felt insecure? Or have you seen others pass opportunities that they should have seized that has really impacted you?
Yeah. It's a good question again. I think imposter syndrome is natural in all of us. And I think we don't know to the extent that someone else may be dealing with it sometimes. I had a colleague just a couple weeks ago. We were going back and forth on something, and he mentioned that he had imposter syndrome on what we were discussing. And I'm like, you? Like, no, you don't. And it's amazing how you can not understand that someone, you know, what we all kind of feel the same thing. And some people just put on a braver face for it. In terms of passing up an opportunity, I would say for the most part, despite nerves or imposter syndrome, or maybe not believing I'm qualified for something, I'm pretty good at still going after it. I typically, like, I'll run through it in my head a million times, but I try not to let it hold me back. I don't have like a specific instance that I can think of where it's inhibited me from moving forward. Like, I would say, though, I have imposter syndrome that, like, I'm on your podcast, like, genuinely, I'm like, why don't you want to talk to me? Like, what's the, why? You know, I think that we all go through a level of it, but I think it's important to try and, like, be self-aware and understand how much of it is you in your head and your insecurities, and how much of it is actual reality that you can't do something.
Yeah. And they do say that females tend to want to check every box before we'll actually step into that. And I mean, I do agree with that, but I mean, we do see that even with males, it is hard to overcome things that we're not sure of. And we feel very vulnerable in those spots. And so, I mean, that's awesome that you like can recognize, because I think that's the most important part is recognizing, hey, I'm nervous here, but I'm going to be big, bad, and audacious and do it anyway. See what the hell happens, right?
Yeah. Not perfect, but I think
it's gotten you like far further in your career. And I think that's important for people to understand that, you know, listening to someone like yourself is like, we're all humans, right? And so by overcoming that is amazing, because then you do great things like you're doing today for companies. So it's awesome. I have one last question for you. I knew it would go so fast talking to you, Cassie.
Yeah.
Just define what success is to you. What is the definition?
Gosh, I feel like this has changed for me over the years. before children, I've got two young kiddos at home. I've got a 2 and a 4-year-old, and before children, success for me was like, how quick can I climb the ladder? How quick can I get this next rank and this next title? And how young can I be to reach the top? That was like what it was all about. And I would pass up. I can think of a few times. I don't really like to talk about regrets because I believe in the moment you made the right decision for you. But there are times where I passed up some great like personal opportunities in order to try and keep climbing this ladder at whatever company I was at. And so that was success a few years ago. And now to me, and I think some of this has like since finding FreightVana and being so happy in what I'm doing, success to me is like being aligned in a company's growth and mission and being a part of building something and being genuinely happy, like no Sunday scaries, no like waking up with dread or nerves about something. And I've got two kids. I mean, my 2-year-old, he doesn't know what's going on with me, but my 4-year-old emulates what I do. And she types on her little laptop and like, she thinks that work is great. Like, she'll learn someday, but, success to me is just like being able to be happy in what I'm doing and like show that at home too, and have my success at work positively impact my home life. And like, that's all I'm striving for.
That's awesome. Cassie, thank you so much for being on the show today. How can people get in contact with you if they want to drop you a line?
My LinkedIn, which, Cassie Quien, there's not too many queens out there. Otherwise, I mean, can share my email if you'd like, cassie.queen@freightvana.io. But otherwise, LinkedIn's probably the best.
Awesome. Well, we look forward to seeing you continually climb this industry that's going to be male and female dominated here.
That's right.
We'll keep going, but thank you so much again for
Thanks, Nicole. Yeah.